Washington D.C. quote, Union Station is usually a crossroads of travelers and tourists, a place where the city's daily rhythm pulses through marble halls and echoing corridors. On any given day, you'll find commuters rushing to catch trains, families reuniting, and visitors marveling at the station's grand architecture. But on August 20th, 2025, Union Station was transformed into the stage for a national debate, its usual bustle replaced by a tense, expectant energy. News crews set up their cameras and police cordoned off large sections of the station, preparing for something far beyond the ordinary. High-ranking White House officials, including Vice President JD Vance, arrived not to travel, but to meet National Guard soldiers now patrolling the station. Their presence was a clear signal. The federal government was taking a direct role in the city's security. Their visit transformed the busy hall into a symbol of federal power and political theater, as the familiar space became almost unrecognizable under the weight of security and spectacle. The officials took to a balcony, flanked by soldiers, as media swarmed and protesters gathered below. The air was thick with tension, every movement watched by cameras and crowds alike. The administration wanted to show it was taking action on what it calls a crisis of crime in D.C., using Union Station's iconic setting to send a message. The press conference was as much about optics as it was about policy, with every word carefully chosen for the cameras. The contrast was stark. Disciplined troops above, angry chants and drumming below. The station became a living tableau of America's current political divide, with each side determined to make its voice heard. The official speeches about security were often drowned out by protest. Demonstrators shouted, waved signs, and made it clear that not everyone agreed with the administration's approach. This moment captured the city's deep divisions, two visions for DC's future, clashing under the station's grand arches. The historic building, once a symbol of unity and movement, now reflected the nation's fractured politics. The visit was less about safety and more about who gets to decide what safety means in the nation's capital. In the end, Union Station became a stage for a larger struggle, one that's still playing out across the city and the country. Vice President JD Vance led the high-profile visit, stepping into the spotlight as the administration's most visible advocate for a new, tougher approach to law and order in the nation's capital. His arrival was met with a flurry of cameras and reporters, all eager to capture the moment as a symbol of shifting priorities in Washington. The White House made it clear that this was more than just a routine appearance. It was a deliberate show of force, underscoring the administration's commitment to cracking down on crime and restoring a sense of security to the city's streets. Vance spoke passionately, weaving in personal stories about his own family and upbringing, drawing a direct line between the administration's policies and the safety of everyday Americans. He emphasized that these measures weren't just political. They were about protecting families and ensuring that children could grow up without fear. Alongside him, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth projected the weight of military authority, his presence a reminder that the administration was prepared to use every tool at its disposal. Hegseth's involvement sent a powerful message. Federal resources, including the National Guard, would be mobilized if necessary to maintain order and support local law enforcement. Stephen Miller, the administration's deputy chief of staff, took a hard line at the press conference, delivering the sharpest rhetoric of the day. He dismissed the concerns of protesters and doubled down on the administration's decision to crack down, framing it as a necessary response to chaos. Together, Vance, Hegseth, and Miller represented a united front, combining political leadership, military strength, and uncompromising messaging to define the administration's strategy. Their coordinated appearance was designed to send a clear signal of unity and resolve, aiming to reassure supporters that the administration was taking decisive action, while also challenging critics to question their resolve. The trio's message was unmistakable. The White House was firmly in control, ready to confront any opposition, and determined to shape the future of D.C. according to its vision. While the event was meticulously staged for the cameras, the underlying tension was palpable, reflecting the deep divisions and high stakes at play. The administration's top officials wanted to project unwavering strength, but the visible resistance from the city's residents and activists was impossible to ignore, hinting at the challenges ahead. The visit set the stage for a high-stakes confrontation over law, order, and the balance of local autonomy, an early chapter in what promised to be a defining struggle for the city's future. The official's main purpose was to thank the National Guard troops now patrolling D.C. from a Shake Shack on the balcony. Vice President Vance addressed the soldiers, expressing gratitude and handing out burgers. The gesture was meant to boost morale and show a personal side to the administration's tough policy. Sharing food with troops became a photo op, an image of camaraderie and support. But downstairs, protesters' chants echoed, turning the act into a symbol of division. For the administration, it was honoring heroes. For critics, it was a political stunt. The simple act of handing out burgers became a flashpoint in the larger struggle over power and control in the Capitol. The event highlighted how even small gestures can become loaded with political meaning. In D.C., nothing is just a burger. Everything is a statement. As officials spoke above, protesters filled Union Station's main hall, their chants and drumming drowning out the speeches. Free D.C. was their rallying cry, a demand for autonomy and respect for local democracy. The protesters saw the federal takeover as the latest violation of their rights. Stephen Miller and Vice President Vance responded with harsh words, dismissing the demonstrators as out of touch and irrelevant. The clash was more than noise. It was a battle over who gets to define the city's future. The administration claimed to protect D.C. The protesters insisted they didn't want this kind of help. The confrontation turned a staged event into a public showdown. The protest ensured the administration's message couldn't go unchallenged. The sound of dissent echoed through the station, making clear that the city's residents would not be silent. Union Station became a microcosm of the larger fight for D.C.'s self-determination. The Union Station event was the result of President Trump's decision to seize control of D.C.'s police force under the Home Rule Act. On August 11, 2025, citing an emergency, the president put the city's law enforcement under federal command. National Guard troops, federal agents, and even out-of-state police flooded the city, creating an unprecedented security presence. The law allows federal control for 30 days, but the administration has hinted it could last longer. Many residents and officials fear this emergency could become permanent, undermining local democracy. The administration's initial plan to appoint a DEA chief as police commissioner was blocked in court, revealing fierce local resistance. The takeover set off a legal and political battle over who really governs the Capitol. The city's autonomy, already limited, was now under direct threat. The federal move was dramatic and deeply controversial. D.C. became the testing ground for how far presidential power can reach. The White House insists its intervention is necessary to end a crime crisis that local leaders can't control. Officials argue that the situation in Washington, D.C. has reached a tipping point, with violence and lawlessness threatening the safety of everyday residents. They say that without federal involvement, the city would continue to spiral, putting more lives at risk. Vice President Vance and Stephen Miller frame the crackdown as a civil rights mission, claiming it protects D.C.'s most vulnerable, especially Black residents. They emphasize that the federal government has a responsibility to step in when local systems fail, and that their actions are meant to ensure equal protection for all communities. The administration touts hundreds of arrests, dozens of seized firearms, and a reported 35% drop in violent crime since the takeover. Officials highlight these numbers as proof that their aggressive approach is working, pointing to a visible reduction in shootings and robberies across the city. They argue that the federal strategy is already making the city safer. More officers on the streets, new technology, and coordinated operations are, according to the White House, restoring a sense of order and calm to neighborhoods that have long felt neglected. But their case relies as much on perception as on numbers. Vance says you just have to look around to see the crisis. The administration points to boarded-up storefronts and anxious residents as evidence that the city's problems are visible and urgent. The administration is betting that public fear and frustration will outweigh doubts about the data. They believe that the mood on the streets and the stories people share will justify their actions even if the statistics are debated. Their message, only federal action can restore order and protect families. They promise that with continued support, neighborhoods will become safer places for children to grow up and for businesses to thrive. The White House's narrative is one of chaos tamed by strength. They portray themselves as the only force capable of bringing stability to a city in turmoil, using every tool at their disposal. But critics say the numbers and the reality are far more complicated. They argue that the administration's approach may overlook deeper issues and that the true impact of these policies remains to be seen. The administration's claims are as much about politics as public safety, sparking a heated debate over the real costs and benefits of federal intervention in the nation's capital. Most D.C. residents reject the federal takeover. 65% oppose it, according to recent polls. Mayor Muriel Bowser and city leaders call the move an attack on local democracy and a misuse of the National Guard. For them, this is about more than policing. It's a fight for self-government. Protests, yard signs, and public statements show a city united in resistance. Residents feel treated like political pawns, not a real community. Outsiders making decisions for D.C. fuels anger and resentment. The conflict exposes the city's unique status, a capital for the nation, but home to 700,000 people without full rights. The takeover has turned a debate about crime into a struggle for equality and freedom. D.C.'s fight is about who gets to decide its future. The city's pushback is a reminder that democracy is always contested, especially in the nation's capital. Is crime in D.C. really out of control? The answer depends on who you ask. The White House accuses the local police of hiding the truth, even launching a federal investigation into D.C.'s crime stats. Administration officials cite their own numbers, claiming a dramatic drop in crime since the takeover. But D.C. police data tells a different story. Violent crime is at a 30-year low, down 26% from last year. The result is two competing realities, one of crisis, one of progress. The battle over numbers is really a battle over who gets to define the city's problems. The justification for federal control rests on the idea of a hidden emergency. In D.C., facts themselves have become political weapons. The standoff in D.C. is about more than crime. It's about who gets to decide what safety means. The Trump administration argues that federal intervention is necessary when local leaders fail. Critics say true safety can't exist without local control and democracy. The heavy presence of troops changes neighborhoods, dividing residents over whether it's protection or occupation. The debate is about power, rights, and the meaning of community. D.C. is now the testing ground for how far federal authority can go. The questions raised here about order, freedom, and who gets to choose have no easy answers. The clash at Union Station was just one moment in a much larger struggle. The future of America's capital and its democracy hangs in the balance.